Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this Pembroke Upper Ottawa Valley OPP Detachment Board meeting to order for October 29th. Before doing so, I would like to acknowledge that as we gather today, respectfully acknowledge on behalf of council and the community that the city of Pembroke resides on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We thank the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. It is with this statement that we honor and respect the Algonquins and whose land we reside. So having called the meeting to order, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda. I have Michael, seconded by Pat. Those in favor? That is carried. Minutes were circulated as part of your package. July 17th, 2024 is the agenda, is the minutes that were circulated. I'd entertain a motion for their adoption. So I have Des, seconded by Christine. Those in favor? And that is carried. Any business arising out of those minutes that we aren't going to talk about this afternoon? Seeing none. So at this time, if I can turn it over to welcome to the inspector and the staff sergeant, and if I can call upon you in respect to your report.
Thank you very much, sir, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to report on the Q3 for our new Pembroke Detachment Board. Now, this is the first time that we've seen this report in this layout under the new mandate under the Community Safety and Policing Act. So the report is very different than what we are normally used to. It is laid out differently. There are a lot more sections that I am to report on, and I have included everything that is laid out as we get more comfortable with the process and at the board's discretion if there are issues. In this case, I included everything because I didn't want to make it seem like I was hiding anything from the board, but certainly as we get more comfortable with the flow of information, if there is stuff that the board chooses to zero in on more so than others. But in this case, I've included everything, which I understand that we are under a time crunch, so I will just kind of roll through it because there are a few things that we do want to present on without getting too deep into the weeds on the numbers. This can also be, if there's something that any individual member zeroes in on and say, I would like to get more information on that, I can certainly follow up on that when we're not in chambers. Starting with the criminal code and provincial statute charges laid, we have had a very, very slight increase in charges. However, year to date, there has been a 10% increase in charges laid. What's also included is they have included graphs just to kind of, if that is easier to read. On the traffic related side, that is an area that we have struggled with. Not only this last quarter, but year to date, with the exception of the distracted driving charges, which has seen a 26% increase year to date. Moving over to the violent crime section, there has been a noticeable decrease year to date in our sexual offenses, which is great news. Overall, this quarter, a 7.8% uptick in violent crime, which is not good, coupled with the fact that year to date, we are trending 12% so far year to date on the violent crime. Flipping over to the property crime section, the good news there this quarter, we saw a 20% decrease overall in property crimes. The street crime unit, which has experienced a bit of a turnover, so there's certain members that have left and new people have come in. So like any unit starting out, there is a learning process. So they are starting to get their feet underneath them now, which in my opinion, is what we're counting for the new charges coming in as far as on the property side of the house. Year to date, we are still trending downwards at 6%, which is still good. The drug crime this quarter saw a sharp decrease of 60%. Year to date, however, we are at a slight uptick of 12%. So this is when I'm talking about the other categories that we never really got into at our previous meetings, where they talk about federal statutes, provincial statutes, slight increase of 12%. What is driving those at this point in time? I would have to zero in on that. Why there's a 15% increase in federal statutes as well as provincial statutes, which can include sometimes very obscure acts that we don't normally deal with on a regular basis. There are some there are multiple different provincial offenses, statutes that officers are sometimes encountered during their investigations. Youth charges, this again, sometimes this is of interest to certain boards. We've never really delved into that really as a board, certainly during my tenure, but it does show that it is consistent to last year, but a slight uptick. And I say slight 13 or 14 this year versus 13 last year. And it discloses, it gets into the details about where we are sending our youth charges, what is resulting in court convictions. We do try to focus on the diversion for our youth. And what and of those charges, again, it breaks it down to what are we seeing typically dealing with our youth. Now, I will draw the board's attention to when you see child pornography. This is not child pornography in the sense that these are typically situations where you have teenagers that have taken photos and sent them to other people, which meets the definition of child pornography. That is typically what we deal with in a high school setting. Nothing more nefarious than that. Flipping over to the next page, we have our clearance rates when it comes to all the different categories, which some more successful than others. Obviously, we always strive to be 100% successful in all of our investigations, where we are sitting at year to date in when it comes to violent crime is a slight decrease. Actually the same for property crime as well, 7.3. Moving on to motor vehicle collisions. This quarter saw a slight increase of 27% overall, 40% increase with property damage only, 25% decrease in PI injuries or non-fatal injuries. We are still trending in the right direction year to date of a decrease of 17%. I can add on that our collision reporting center, which was, if you recall, the officer set up at the Pembroke Detachment that is handling office walk-ins. And the idea behind that is to take calls for service where if you had a minor fender bender in the parking lot here, rather than have an officer attend there. Of course, there's criteria that is set up to that the scenario has to meet, but it affords individuals the opportunity to just drive their vehicle to the Pembroke Detachment to report the collision there, and it saves an officer having to attend the scene. More convenient for the driver sometimes, rather than waiting for an officer to show up if they are tied up at other call for service. They can just go there, and it doesn't have to be immediately. It can be later on the day or even the next day. Next page is dedicated completely to fatals. Fortunately, we're at 0, and I hope that continues. E-ticketing warnings, which is something we didn't traditionally track. Somebody gets stopped for speeding. They get a ticket or they don't get a ticket. Or no, somebody is stopped for an offense. They get a ticket, but then they get a warning on a couple other things. That is something we never tracked. Now we actually do track them. And the e-ticketing year to date, 30% this quarter, 20% overall this year. Simply just warnings. So you can see that there's a lot of information that these reports are now capturing. Moving on to public complaints, very happy to say we're sitting at 0, which is great. The daily activity reporting breaks down all the different patrol hours, consistent year to date with as far as, because I know we are talking about the patrol hours, in particular the foot patrol, trending very similar to last year. Moving on to this quarter for mental health calls for service. I know we've talked about this already in Q1 and Q2, that our mental health calls do take a significant amount of time, and that the volume is increasing, as you can see year to date, 375 year to date versus 319 last year. So still very much an issue with our officers that we are mitigating with the use of our MSTR program and MESA teams. Overdose information year to date, slightly below last year, and year to date, unfortunately, 38 versus 27 last year. Next page is the unfounded category. This, you will recall, was sparked by a report, and I believe it was a CBC investigator that looked at sex assault offenses where, and this was, to be clear, not a question that officers didn't believe the victims. It was more of a scoring, how they would clear an occurrence. Sometimes, cleared by charge as in a complete unsolved, or unfounded was just there wasn't, the victim for whatever reason didn't want to pursue it any further, so it was cleared off as unfounded. The interpretation of that in the media was that the officers didn't believe it. Anyway, it required all the municipality or all the municipal police services, us included, to revisit how we were clearing off sex assault allegations, and it involved us scoring how we were clearing these occurrences, basically adding new categories. Victim declines to proceed is one of them, which can happen, but that's why we are now specifically tracking, if you're truly calling this incident unfounded, why? So this is actually now a very separate category amongst the police or detachment board reports. And if we are scoring incidents as unfounded, what are they? And that is the breakdown there. Last page is the referrals to victim service agencies by year. We introduced our victim specialist to make sure that we were in fact capturing and engaging as many victim services to victims in our community as possible. And it breaks it down further as far as the age range of people that do accept services, and whether that ever needs to be, if for some reason we saw that youth were not engaging with victim services, but people over the age of 40 are, well, why aren't people under 40 engaging more? So it's just something, it gives us something to, a few nuts and bolts to work with. We have had victim services set up in our front lobby for office hours to ensure that not only with our victim specialist who is in-house within the detachment, but that victim services is what is set up with office hours as well at the detachment, because there, I see a lot of value in that, ensuring that victims are connected to services. So that has certainly been a mission of ours, and I'm pleased to see that the numbers do trend in the right direction. That is the detachment board report. There are a few things that Staff Sergeant McNeil is going to cover off as far as our greatest hits over the last quarter.
Afternoon, everyone. Nice to see all your faces again. I'll quickly go through. So our community street crime team, as Inspector Neufeld alluded to, there was 2 warrants done, one in August and then one in September, which saw drugs, significant amounts taken off the streets, as well as in one case, some people not local to the community arrested and charged. You would have those, but just to highlight some of those warrants that they completed. Some good things in our community, the annual Kids and Cops Fishing, which was in August, saw 80 kids come to it, and it continues to grow in popularity, not just amongst the kids, but businesses that want to be a part of it, which is always nice to see. And Sean Peter and his team always do great work with that. The torch run, which Mayor Jeremy was a part of, it saw a total between Ottawa and Pembroke raising $4,500. And our team again leading with Sean Peter and some of our PLT members a part of that in both locations. And then just to give you the numbers on the 3 traffic campaigns that have happened since the last meeting. So the August Civic Long Weekend, there were, and this is collectively not broken down to just the Pembroke location, but through the detachment area, there was 20 big board charges, so speeding, impaired, seatbelts and cell phones, 20 charges plus 2 impaired charges. On the Labor Day weekend, we saw 28 charges and an additional two impaireds. And then over Thanksgiving weekend, it was 25 charges and 4 impaireds total. So lots of good work being done proactively by the officers during that time. And then I do want to make mention really quickly, you would remember or recall the DREs, the drug recognition officers that we have. One of our younger officers, PC Hunter Adams, was recognized as the Rookie of the Year for the in the province for the OPP. So really good to have him in our area, and that just speaks to the volume and amount of dedication that that officer has here in the area. And obviously it's benefiting our community because of the fact that he's doing so much work related to that. So always nice when some of our officers get recognized, but a great officer and his expertise in having in the community. That's all I have for mine, unless there's any questions.
And we had the golden helmets.
Oh, yes, we had the golden helmets, but that was all arranged by Inspector
No,
Neufeld.
team effort, team effort.
And I know that lots of people, you guys were there to see it, but it is pretty spectacular what happens with their unit and the specialty that they have. But it's always such a great thing for the community to see. And a lot of people don't even know that that's a thing that's in the OPP. And unfortunately, we don't have a bike assigned to our detachment for specific reasons, but Inspector Neufeld could speak more to that.
Specific reasons is the bikes are assigned to detachments that have 400 series highways in them. Yeah. Which makes sense, right?
Yeah, we've had officers who are qualified, but they only have so many bikes and they only go to certain locations.
And on behalf of the team, thank you very much for the very generous gift that the city provided. And I'll be facilitating that transport down to the regional headquarters. So thank you for that.
Questions for the inspector and staff sergeant? Okay.
Just a comment, really. So this is a brand new format. I like it. It's specific to the Pembroke OPP detachment, correct?
Correct.
So now it's not all the numbers for the area detachments combined.
That report is specific to Pembroke.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. You know, you can see a lot of the percentages that are going down. And I think it's because of many things that are happening in our community in a positive nature. And so I just want to commend you for your work. And I know you're working with the MESA program, and there's a lot of good things happening in our community. And I think the public should know that. So the more we can communicate to them about all the things, those silos are coming down is what I'm saying. And partnerships are forming that will only strengthen, you know, everybody's specific goals. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can from the chair, question about diversion. So individuals may or may not know that there's something called the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It used to be the Young Offenders Act way back when. What I'm curious about, Inspector, is when you talk about diversion here, is that officers diverting certain charges, or is that also including the courts, which do divert when it's youth, significant numbers? Or I'm just trying to figure out the diversion piece, whether it's OPP, court, both. I don't know.
Well, there's and I don't want to comment on the officers each case. There's likely sometimes there's going to be a consultation done with the courts. Short answer, it's both. There are incidents where the officer can make that decision right there and then and say, yes, no, we're just diverting this. There are other instances where there would be a consultation. And again, this is all at the end of the day, how it is being scored. At the end of the day, billed to the municipality. These are calls for service involving youth. There were charges late, however, they were diverted. And it was a graffiti.
There's criteria that need to be met to divert
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, no,
It's a way for us to track them.
yes, no, and I appreciate that. And I know that in years gone past, when I was in the court, I knew that, that there's the Youth Criminal Justice Act and trying to divert things and trying to have restorative type of justice as opposed to putting everyone in jail, that sort of thing. So I'm aware of that piece. I just didn't know what the numbers reflected, if it's everything and it's everything. So I appreciate that. So I got Pat and I have Des.
Sorry, final, I had another question. The numbers being low when it comes to youth getting victim assistance, that bothers me.
No, that was
There was something about the youth numbers.
that was just me saying, for example, if we saw a trend
Okay,
that identified, because this is the Q3 is the first time we've used this report. So if I, or the staff sergeant sees a trend that we notice that there are less youth engaging with victim
Okay.
services, then that is something that I would want to know. Why is that?
okay, and that's, yeah, so I
Yeah,
misheard you.
apologize.
So that's
Yeah, no,
fine.
I
No,
should've-
thank you for that.
I
'Cause
just
that would have bothered me a
Gave
lot.
that as an example. And
We'll
Yes.
see what it is, so they are accessing.
Okay, good, great.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know they're accessing, but.
actually, I think I use that example. I think it would be the exact opposite. I think youth would embrace assistance
Yeah.
versus maybe a more senior demographic. I think just by nature of how we were raised.
Yeah, it's sad to think we accepted some things that now would not be acceptable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Des?
Yeah, thank you very much, Inspector. So I have two questions. One, I noticed for the daily activity reporting, it was only for the quarter. And I was wondering could we get that for year to date? That information for year to date. Now, you might have to get back to us on that one. And then my other question
What
is,
page was that on?
that was on.
Oh, I got it.
Don't know what page.
Was there a specific,
So I just wanted.
for everything?
So
or-
I'm just looking, and like for the quarter,
Yeah.
I'm seeing like a declining trend year over year from like 2022 to 2024. And so I wanted to see that on a year to date basis and see, is that trend declining for the year?
For everything?
Yeah,
Okay.
like,
Yeah. I can
because
pull that up.
everything else in the report gave the quarter and the year to date, except for that section.
Yeah, that's how the report writes. I
Oh,
don't know.
okay.
But if that is something that you specifically want to look at, if there's something, specific aspect you want to look at.
Okay, let me narrow my question down and I'll email you then.
Perfect.
Deal?
Thank you.
And then the other question I have is when we're looking at acceptance rates, in 2024, we offered 900, but only 300 accepted. What's the stopping block there? Like, why aren't more people accepting? Yeah,
That was at the end of the report.
yeah, that was at near the end.
900 accepted. Well, what is the stopping block? I couldn't even begin to tell you. There's
No.
probably a myriad of reasons, right?
Okay,
Personality, culture,
Yeah.
history,
okay,
stigma,
yeah,
fear, sometimes how the officer sometimes, let's be honest, how the officer you want help? You want me to connect you with somebody? No, thanks.
yeah, it's gonna change the
Maybe.
outcome.
Not suggesting that's the case, but I mean, the delivery,
Yeah,
there could be a myriad of reasons.
perfect.
Sometimes people are already connected with resources if they've been involved with this before, so it's that automatic referral again, like, would you like to be connected with victim services? No, I'm good, I know how to access them and I know what they can offer. So an officer would put that down as not accepted, but it doesn't mean that they don't know. how
They're
to
not
access it,
engaged.
And it's that ability for them, because they've already had previous experiences with them, they know how to reach out to them. So it could be sometimes just like the way the data is collected, it's not
Okay.
necessarily that people aren't accessing what is available.
The takeaway from that particular table though is that's the highest it's ever been.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's good.
That is great.
For
It's
most
trending
people,
up.
Bad side of that is we have that many victims that need to be connected with victim
Yeah.
services. That's
Yeah.
the downside of that. But
Yeah.
Inspector Neufeld mentioned too, like our victim specialist. And I do know that our victim specialist, when she's working with the cases, often if perchance we did have that scenario, like the officer, maybe doesn't deliver in a way that someone says, yeah, I want to, that victim specialist, when she's connecting again, she has a different approach, and it's at a time where maybe they've had an opportunity to let things settle
Reflect.
and reflect exactly and be more accepting to, like, okay, maybe I do need that. And so that's one of the things that Jackie Pearson, our victim specialist, really hones in on is, I know that you were offered victim services, however, you find, I'm letting you know again that they're still available. So it's that kind of double check that they are being offered more than once.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other questions for the inspector and the staff sergeant, we'll move forward to new business. First up is fortification bylaw. Director Soria.
Hello, good afternoon. So in 2002, the city of Pembroke passed a bylaw, being a bylaw to regulate fortification of land and to prohibit excessive fortification of land. However, sections in the municipal act regarding the ability to regulate the fortification of land has changed since the enactment of the 2002 bylaw. Therefore, it's being recommended that the existing bylaw be repealed and replaced by the attached bylaw that you have in your packages. So staff have reviewed the fortification bylaws across a number of municipalities, which include Hamilton, Mississauga, Cobourg, Township of Puslinch, Township of Uxbridge, and Belleville. And we were informed, which informed the development of the proposed bylaw referenced to in this report. Staff also consulted with the Building and Bylaw Enforcement Department, as well as the Upper Ottawa Valley OPP. The detachment commander felt the issue of booby traps should be added to the proposed bylaw, which it has been added now. The bylaw will regulate in respect to the fortification of and protective elements applied to land. So fortification refers to the act of fortifying land and building, which may have the undesirable effect of impeding access to land and buildings, but that includes like the installation of steel bars over windows or armor plate doors, while the application of protective elements refers to the use of devices such as surveillance equipment, perimeter warning devices, and electrified fencing, to name a few. So the bylaw's regulation of both the fortification of land and the protective elements applied to land is in line with the approach used by other municipalities as well as the city of Pembroke's existing bylaw. So excessive fortification of land or the application of excessive protective elements is likely to pose a serious risk to health, safety, and welfare of municipal and law enforcement officials and or emergency services personnel when confronted with such land when acting in the course of their lawful duties or in response to emergency situations, as well as to the occupants of land whose ability to escape an emergency situation is or may be hindered or prevented. The enactment of the bylaw will also help address concerns pertaining to the use of surveillance equipment that violates the privacy of others, such as video cameras, capturing images, or making recordings of neighboring properties. There are various entities to which the bylaw would not apply, such as financial institutions, detention centers, lands occupied by the city, federal or provincial governments, lands occupied by police forces, courthouses, etc. The bylaw also provides the ability for an individual to make an application for a partial or complete exemption from the bylaw, which would be sent to the chief administrative officer. There, he or she may issue an exemption with or without conditions if there's a reasonable connection between the necessity for the exemption and the rationale provided for the exemption and the nature and extent of the exemption being requested. Enacting the proposed bylaw will allow the city to regulate and respect the fortification of and protective elements applied to land and prohibit excessive fortification of land and protective elements applied to land, which includes the ability to regulate and enforce the use of excessive surveillance equipment. So in the event of non-compliance, the city would have an option to have the contravention corrected at the cost of the occupant And for the initial non-compliance, and if approved by the Ministry of the Attorney General, a municipal fine of $300 is recommended. And then further non-compliance may result in charges being laid under the Provincial Offences Act, which is listed under section 11.7 of the proposed bylaw, which means we could take them to court, the first offense being a maximum of $20,000, a second offense could be a maximum of $50,000, and a third offense, a maximum of $100,000. So that is the proposed fortification bylaw. We're looking for direction from this committee so that this can move on to the Planning and Development Committee at its November 5th meeting.
Thank you for the report. Before we go to board members, does either the inspector or staff sergeant have any comment? You may not.
No, we were consulted, and besides the one amendment, I'm satisfied with the changes to the bylaw.
Very good. Pat?
I guess my only query would be about the the paragraph on page 2, middle of the page, where it talks about the enactment of the bylaw will help address concerns pertaining to the use of surveillance equipment that violates the privacy of others, such as video cameras capturing images or making recordings of a neighboring property. I understand about the invasion of privacy, but we have been promoting the use of security cameras on private property and residential properties, and we have them all through the city now. So what stops someone from saying, you know, that guy's camera caught me with my pajamas on in my yard the other day? Because it's hard, you know, sometimes you situate your security camera on your property, and depending where it is, it may pick up another neighbor's front yard or side yard. So what prevents somebody from nitpicking and saying, hey, you know what? I know that your camera can see me. So I just, if you could clarify that, I mean, because things like that do happen in our community where people pull apart, you know, we don't want neighbors feuding over this. I know its purpose, but.
Well, through you, I think that would have to come through the complaint process. So if the neighbor did complain, then it would have to be looked at just to see if the cameras are focused on the neighbor's property or not. I mean, they're supposed to be directed towards the street, you know, so you can see people coming in or in your backyard, but not towards the neighbors.
But I mean, it's a gray area, I think, because I think from a safety perspective, personally, I don't have a camera on my property, and I know I've been thinking about getting one, but I would be happy if someone happened to catch the front of my house as someone was, you know, doing something violating my property. So I just kind of wonder about that one.
And I can give an example to Pat's concern. My business is on the corner of Fraser and Nelson Street. My camera points to the road. Their house is across the road.
Yeah.
So I'm pointing towards the road, but
You can see it. Mhm.
it's visible.
So how do you control something like this is what I'm asking.
So if I can just add, so I know my cameras, because I do have cameras on my house, I can control the sensitivity so that I'm not picking off things that I'm not interested in. I'm interested on individuals coming towards my house and like street inwards. I'm not interested in the neighbors. And as to your concern, I am aware of one property in the city of Pembroke, and the relevant individuals were engaged and it was addressed. And I'm aware of, not in the official capacity in terms of the city of Pembroke, but in another capacity, I'm aware of one that happened in Ottawa. And again, the OPP were involved and it was resolved. So things happen. And so you address it where individuals are looking at things that they shouldn't be looking at. Christine?
Yeah, I'm not going to really add more to that other than my own experience with the camera. Yes, it's pointed out to the street. Yes, you could probably see like the front step across the road. Would they find that an intrusion? I highly doubt it. You know, I mean, the reality is you want to see who's coming into your yard. And if you have a big driveway, you need a fairly big scan and, you know, people going by. So I think the complaint process, if people do have an issue, is what's going to have to happen. But I don't think we all have to get rid of our cameras. I certainly would not want to do that.
after all of the advancements that we have, the cam safe and so
Mr.
forth.
Chairman, I think we're painting with a wide brush there because the fact that probably 50% of the vehicles have cameras on them and we're running up and down the street and they get front and back. So I think there'd have to be a little bit of discretion used there, something worded that wouldn't trigger. In other words, a complaint that was triggered would have to be reasonable.
Yeah, so just to massage something in there, like.
Yeah.
So outside of what was said in terms of concerns, is there a direction from the Police Services Board, which is what the director is looking for? Yes, Colleen?
Well, I think you have to be careful with the massaging too, because I mean, I think it's not, you're right, it's not for the front steps and things like that, but it's more for the backyard. If somebody has a pool, you know, and they're in their bathing suit or whatever, that's what this intent is to make sure that somebody's in the camera is not directed solely in somebody's backyard or something like that. I think the complaint basis you see that. And I think then maybe if there is some kind of adjustment of the camera that can be dealt with during that complaint process. And I don't know, maybe you do, but we don't seem to get a lot of complaints about cameras or anything like that. No.
Okay,
No. So
Okay.
it's just a protection, I think.
thank you.
Yeah, because in Pembroke, I'm only aware of the one where the individual was using cameras, mirrors, and other things to try and watch their neighbor. So I think it's a rarity, and those individuals get addressed.
And
Yes.
one other thing, if we see that it is becoming a problem in the future, we can always amend the bylaw and do something at that point.
So is that the direction you want, or do you want a formal motion? What do you want from us?
If you had a motion, then I would then provide that motion in my report to the Planning and Development Committee on its next meeting.
So I see Pat's hand up and she's nodding, so I take it she's making the motion. Do I have a seconder? Second by Michael. Those in favor? And that is carried. There you go. Thank you. Next up is automated speed enforcement.
Good afternoon. So the report at the board for automated speed monitoring within the county comes from correspondence that came from the county. And I guess just to provide a little bit of an overview, automated speed enforcement, I'll just refer to it as ASC to be brief. ASE is being implemented across Ontario under the Highway Traffic Act, Regulation 398/19. ASE is allowed in community and school safety zones on roads with speed limits under 80 kilometers an hour. And both the Ontario Traffic Council and Ontario Traffic Manual guidelines support ASE. So the county has recently sent correspondence to all lower tier municipalities as well as the city of Pembroke. And it has proposed a partnership with anyone interested in implementing ASE in the applicable zones. So through the correspondence, it was outlined that they are partnering with the Local Authority Services, LAS for short, and this would provide the equipment and data processing. So tickets would be issued and processed by the county's Provincial Offences Court with similar payment and dispute options to existing tickets. So ideally, and what is being presented is that it's a turnkey solution. Through the project, all the equipment is provided with granted permission from each respective municipality. And if the county sees it fit to fit into the bigger picture of their ASC plan. The legislative compliance component is the City of Pembroke's traffic bylaw. And I guess this is for consideration. 2024-60 outlines the eligible community and school safety zones. And that is reflective on schedules K and M of the said bylaw that is attached to the report. And I guess for consideration, there are a few questions that the county would like answered, and those are outlined in the report, but a highlight essentially is, Are there any community or school safety zones in the municipality that ASC should be implemented on in the board's opinion? And additionally, there's opportunity for feedback on the ASC program being pitched by the county. Another component for consideration would be, this would be a big change to the public on roads that they often drive on. So consideration of a public consultation piece could also be considered to garner, what the reaction of the public would be. You would have a set speed limit. I am not a professional or technical wizard with ASC, but say for example, the school zone is set to 50, someone's driving 60, your license plate would be snapped, you'd get a ticket in the mail. You can then appeal it, pay it, so on and so forth through the process. So that would have a huge impact on the daily travels of specific residents within the community. So perhaps consideration of getting their feedback is warranted. The financial implications through the program, the county will cover all costs, the lease, setup, maintenance for ASC on municipal roads. Any resulting revenue will be managed by the county's provincial offenses court. And I guess there's a certain breakdown of the revenues that are then relayed to the city. And in conclusion, ASC initiative could provide safety benefits to increase revenue for Pembroke, and then a decision to either endorse, comment on, or simply accept the information provided in the report is at the board's purview. And I'm happy to take any questions if I can answer them. And if not, I can refer them to an appropriate individual who can.
Thank you for your report. And also today we have the Director of Operations, who's no stranger to our board in reference to radar devices, sidewalks, and any number of different things that come underneath the Highway Traffic Act. So do you, Director, have anything else that you want to add, or we'll just start off with the discussion?
One of the questions I may have, I'm not sure if the Inspector of Staff Sergeant can help with this, related to ASE. Is there a certain speed over the speed limit that ASE would track? For example, a school zone has a speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour. At 41, is a ticket issued, or is there a tolerance in there?
Well, this is exactly the discussion and the debate about the automated cameras. For example, in the city of Ottawa, in school zones, the speed limit is 40. And if you are doing 45 and a 40, you are getting a ticket in the mail, and in other locations, not a school zone, they're set at 10 over, which to me, there isn't. So now I've different jurisdiction. I don't work in the city of Ottawa. However, I know in my 29 and a half years, 6 of those spent as a traffic sergeant doing exclusively traffic. I've never stopped somebody on Highway 17, for example, for doing 100 and a 90. We just don't. So that begs the question, and part of our discussion was getting the public consultation piece in. Very, very unlikely you would have complaints from anyone about, now, if it was 41 and a 40, yeah, there'd be some, but I would certainly in a school zone, 45 and a 40, hey, it's a school zone. Safety of our youth is paramount in this community. Slow down. Do 40 and a 40. But if it was on a K Street and you're doing 55 and a 50 and you got a ticket in the mail, I think the perception would be this is just a cash grab by the city to maybe pay for something, which is why, in my opinion, I think the public consultation piece is very critical. That on the face of it, I like the idea. It would afford full-time safe, and I'll be honest, they work. Because when I drive in the city, which I do a lot, you can always tell somebody that's not from the city because everybody else, because you know where the cameras are, because they advertise it. You know where the cameras are, and you'll be doing, 55 and a 50, and you'll see somebody, whoa, like, oh,
Yeah.
they're from out of town. You know, they're getting a ticket. So I am a supporter of them. I endorse their use. My opinion would, I would encourage the city to explore this further. However, with the caveat that they be placed in specific locations for the safety of the community. And that the board does its due diligence or council does its due diligence with the community. Where are problematic issues? We can certainly provide some analytics to that. Where we have traditionally received speeding complaints, what the black cat has been tracking as far as problematic issues. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking like a Bell Street would be a great setup. Lots of layers there, seniors, schools. That would be a great place to start. Which one?
Eganville Road or.
Eganville, yeah.
Isabella,
Eganville's there as well.
Isabella, James,
Oh,
that
yeah.
one there is constant. I think the gentleman and female both come to the. Yeah, there's a couple areas that are continuing to be.
Yeah.
So just back to what I was saying then, and we have to make sure that we're concentrating on the community safety zones and the school zones. It's the only applicable locations. So I'm not quite sure if Isabella's school zone makes it all the way to James close. May not make it all that way, that school zone. Bell Street is a school zone. It's also a community safety zone as well. So it would be applicable. I did get an opportunity to take a quick look at some of our reports from our speed signs and speed cameras. Just trying to get to the one on Bell Street. So Bell Street, for example, and this is clicking the box at the speed of 41 kilometers an hour. So the device is set, a violation is 1 kilometer over the speed limit. So clicking the box at that, in September of 2024, we were there for a couple of weeks. The average percentage of speed violations was 61%. So a significant number of vehicles that were at least 1 kilometer over the speed limit. With that being said, the 85th percentile of speed, the average is 48 kilometers an hour. So we're not up to that 50 on the 85th percentile. Majority of the vehicles are below 50 kilometers an hour. That is a 40 kilometer an hour zone. So in that particular location, it would be something that would likely be pertinent for the safety of those going to school and their seniors, residents, and so forth. Angus Campbell Drive is a community safety zone coming down the hill. And if anybody has driven a half-ton truck that's a little on the heavy side, unless you've got your foot pushing against that brake pedal, you're not staying at 40 kilometers an hour coming down a hill. So we have to be careful that, again, it's not looked at as a money grab. That would be a decision of council to decide whether or not they could work through that perception that it's a money grab. At the same time, we don't want to be seen with the perception that we don't care, because we do care. We just have to be cognizant of where it's appropriate and where it's not appropriate. Carmody Street is a school safety zone. That's at a 30 kilometer an hour zone. The average percentage of speed violations at 31 kilometers an hour is 87%. And that again was through the first couple of weeks of September in 2024. The average speed at the 85th percentile is 45 kilometers an hour. So there's a high number of violations, but that could be at 41 kilometers an hour. And the likelihood is we probably wouldn't be pursuing a ticket at 41 kilometers an hour. Again, that would be perceived as a money grab, and strictly a money grab. The school zones in the city of Pembroke, a little different than in the rural communities in the rest of the county. I'm thinking of Rockwood on Round Lake Road, Petawawa Boulevard, Pinecrest or Pinewood School. Pine View School on Petawawa Boulevard. Thanks very much. Long stretch, more of a rural type atmosphere. Very, very applicable, in my opinion. Bell Street kind of goes along with that. You take Highview, it's bordered by Cecilia, Dixon, Herbert Street. All three of those streets are school zones, because we make sure our school zones encompass the school as much as possible. Holy Name at the corner of Trafalgar and Mary Street, school zone is Trafalgar, Mary, and First Avenue. Automated speed enforcement wouldn't be applicable in all those three streets. It just wouldn't make sense to have cameras trying to ticket on First Avenue between two stop signs. Trafalgar Road is at a four-way stop where the school is. It may not be applicable to have automated speed enforcement there. So we just have to make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that it's not a blanket thing where we're just going to do automated speed enforcement at all school locations or all community safety zones, and that the perception isn't there that we're just looking for some big fines to come in. So we'd have to make sure that that kind of stuff was thought about.
Any consideration around playgrounds, play areas? Because that would be another concern of mine, is to have some kind of control around playgrounds as well as the schools. So I don't know, that's not in here, I don't think, as a recommendation, but.
So Mr. Lewis, did you?
Mr. Lewis?
The playgrounds are not bylawed as community safety zones. So first, we'd have to look at those playground areas and determine whether or not it was appropriate to change them into community safety zones. You take the playground at Mary and James. Again, it's three-sided. So you'd have community safety zone on Mary, James, and again on Isabella Street. And if you did that, you have to be cognizant of the fact that you could be shifting traffic to another location. They're likely Pembroke Street, which is congested as it is right now. So if you're taking traffic off of Isabella Street and moving it to Pembroke Street, you're going to increase the congestion, frustration of drivers, which causes other issues as far as traffic management is concerned. Or you go in the opposite direction off of Mary Street to Miller, and now you've got a speeding problem on Miller. So you also have to be aware that you're not shifting things when you increase community safety zones. There's other mitigating things that can be done, traffic calming that can be done to try and help reduce the speeding or mitigate the speeding or traffic issues in certain locations without going to automatic speed enforcement, which has its different perceptions, or you transfer that to another location. School zones, for example, schools are only operating September through, it's been a while since I've been in school, I'm going to guess here, September through the end of June is when school is in session. Does the automatic speed enforcement continue 12 months of the year? And are you at 41 or 45 kilometers now? Are you hitting somebody in July when the need for the safety isn't quite as important or prominent at that point? I'm not saying that the community and the neighbors don't need to be protected from the speeds as well, but you know, there's those type of considerations as well. So I think around the playground, if I can just say, I think there's other mitigating items that can be put into play around playgrounds to help rather than automated speed enforcement.
Thank you for that. The playground in specific, the new one on Elgin Street, is just over the old railway berm. So, and it's a dead end. So sometimes you look at the whole picture, right? We know that they come over that berm and there is a 50 speed limit, but it's a dead end. And if people are going to the end, they're not doing 50. So if you could look at the playgrounds and just say, what is the risk around that area? I guess that's something we would want to address. Anyway, I like what I'm hearing here. I don't like the idea of 1 kilometer over the speed limit and you're going for the cash. The number 10, I've heard that before from different officers saying, you know, they usually will give them 10 if it's on the 417. They'll give them that play because sometimes if you're not, don't have it in auto cruise, sometimes if it's a little heavy, you pull back, so I like that, with maybe some variances when it comes to the area that we're referring to. I also like Mr. Lewis's idea that when it's summertime and the schools are not being used, maybe we lift that limit a little bit. Okay, so I like what I'm hearing here. Yeah.
Other questions, comments? Christine?
I like it. I'm a big fan of doing what we can to slow people down. 1 kilometer, I'm okay with that. Put it on 40. You gotta, most people have cruise control. Put it on 40. Or don't get behind me, because I probably will. I don't know how much play there would be, and I guess it's a question for the county. Can it be turned off in the school zones if we do happen to have it set up there when schools are out? So I think that's definitely something to be looked at. Although then we're asking the community to have so many different things to remember. Oh, well, the cameras are on these months, but they're not these months. So I think we really need to be careful with that.
Question for the inspector and the staff sergeant. So if that was implemented, do you have, it's probably a very unfair question, but in terms of would it free up officer time? Is there any, because I do know what the current situation is. We stick the Black Cat and radar devices in certain locations when we're trying to get, and we're constantly trying to gather data. Sometimes it's complaint based. Sometimes it's just the due diligence of staff trying to determine traffic patterns and using the data for other purposes in terms of traffic for our traffic management and so forth. But when it's reactive, if I put it that way, that the radar device goes there and then there's officers doing focus patrols, is there any inkling of the reinvestment piece in the sense that officers wouldn't be required to do perhaps certain things and now they can be focusing on different things?
Well, the fact of the matter is, if there was a camera sitting on Bell Street, I wouldn't have a cruiser parked beside it doing radar. Right? So yes, that is 100% accurate that those are resources that could be introduced elsewhere to other locations within the city. Because no, it doesn't, it's not feasible to have the doubling up. And to your point, if I could just backtrack, once they're implemented, leave them implemented. Don't, we're going to turn them off for a certain period. They're there, period. There'll be a public notification. There's automated speed here now. Please follow the rules of the road.
Questions for staff or comments or I do know that for the, and this is probably more for the council side of things, this topic has come up in the past, and I know that the director has looked at different things in the past. And in the past, though, it wasn't the county trying to drive the initiative. It was whether or not, if we were to implement it, what does it cost? It would be borne by the city. Like there's some operational things I would suggest that the director is more than aware of, and we've discussed certain things in terms of I see in the report talking about who is powering it, because if it's stuck to a city pole, it's probably the city of Pembroke paying for the, not that that's going to be a huge bill or anything, but there's a nuances I would suggest to it. And I do appreciate that in the report it's talking about the county seems to have extra staffing hours that they believe that they can do this without hiring any more of that. I'm skeptical of if you've ever been to the POA court. I'm skeptical on that, but that's more of a, I think, a council side, but the PSB being concerned about safety of the public and so forth. Certainly some good discussion, and I don't know if there's any other comments, or if there is, if someone thinks of something afterwards, they can certainly pass it forward. Inspector?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just don't know if the city has the ability to dictate, or if the county is not going to say, no, we're putting one on Bell Street and it's going to be 41 that we're laying tickets. Is there any, does the city have the ability to dictate? For example, I agree 100% on the Angus Campbell piece. But Yeah, to put that at 41 at the bottom there, because yes, trucks come down, but you could put it at 50 and be easily underneath that. So does the city have the ability, it's more of a question. Do you have the ability, authority, once if it is approved and goes forward, can you dictate the speeds at different locations for different reasons? It's all stuff that you could articulate. This is why, because of our known analytics on Angus Campbell, the speed of the hill, the traffic volume, versus a Bell Street where you can say, no, we want that to be 45, start ticketing. Anything 45 and up, start ticketing. Or if the county will push back and say, no, we're bringing this in, it's 41. That's all, just that you have that option.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a number of things that we would be going back. So if the board is recommending that we pursue this a little further, then between myself and the clerk, we'll get back to the county. The county has asked us a number of questions. One of those questions is, do you have locations where you want to consider this? They're asking for our data. When we provide them the data, they may look at it and say, well, Dixon Street's out and Herbert Street's out. We're not even going to consider because there's not enough revenue going to be generated to pay for the camera that's at that location. They may look at the data we have available to us or collect their own data and say, yeah, Bell Street, yeah, it's going to pay for itself and do wonders. So we'll put one there in other locations. At that point, we'll also have those conversations with them about whether or not it's 1 kilometer over, 5 kilometers over. We're concerned about Angus Campbell Drive. We're concerned with other things. Some of the questions that the mayor brought up regarding power. How are they going to pay us back for the power if they're tapping into our street light? What's going to happen if the pole has to be relocated in the future because we're making the intersection wider, and who's paying for those capital costs? It's fine and dandy for them to come in now and say they got all costs and they were setting this up. And they walk away from it other than operations and maintenance, and we want to do road works down the road, and all of a sudden we're paying to relocate the camera. So there's a number of things that we would be talking to the county about and making sure that the program suited our locations and what we feel is the benefits, the safety benefits, and making sure that they're not conflicting. That's how we'd handle it.
Okay, so I think you have more or less, or are you looking for something more formal?
If I could get a formal motion, just, I believe then from my understanding, the board is apt to choose option 1 in the recommendations provided. And it's at the Detachment Board endorsed the City of Pembroke entering into an agreement with the County of Renfrew for automated speed services. It will just open up the door. We can then bring a report to council, perhaps meet prior and try to encompass all the important questions and have that ready for council to proceed.
Okay, so do I have a motion, Des, moving? Do I have a seconder? Are you seconded? No, you got a question? Okay, so is there a seconder? And then at least I can put that part to bed. So Christine is seconding it. So we have a motion, Pat.
I guess my problem with it is just the way this is worded is saying that we're endorsing it already.
Well, just endorsing that should council choose to want to enter into an agreement, like you endorse the idea of
Yeah,
the
I would say
agreement.
we pursue,
Sure, I can change the wording
continue
if the
to
board is.
pursue.
Okay.
Yeah, because we need to get these answers first. Like number 1, if the county's going to dictate to us about 41 or not so much 41, if it's in a certain area, maybe we do want to be strict, but in other areas, maybe we want to give them a 5 kilometer gap. So yeah, I want to make sure we get those answers before.
Sure, and
continue.
that'll be the premise prior to the report coming to council. All of the cornerstones will be tucked away, hopefully,
Okay.
and presented in a fulsome report to council.
Good, thank you.
No problem.
So is the mover and the seconder good with
You good
that?
with pursue? Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so call the question. And it is carried. Great. Okay. Next up, board insurance update, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So as the board is aware, the matter of insurance has been an ongoing ordeal for the past month the past few months for police service boards. And essentially it's because OPP detachment boards no longer qualify as local boards under the Municipal Act, and this creates a new need for insurance and the requirements therein. The Ontario Association of Police Service Boards has coordinated with insurance providers to offer a group insurance options. We all, and myself through as the administrative lead on the PSB board, answered a bunch of questions, submitted it to the board. They have secured an offer for all boards should we be interested in it, and it's encompassed in the package there. And then also through our treasurer, she has gone out and gotten a quote from independent insurance provider, Intact, as again presented in the report as an attachment. So a synopsis of the financial implications: the Intact Insurance, which is the independent insurance broker outside of the board, they're representing, or they're presenting a quote for, including tax, $4,086.72 with a coverage of $10 million. And then through the Ontario board, the group insurance is through McFarlane Rowlands Insurance Brokers, and that premium is $3,888 with a coverage of $5 million. So as you can see, there's a nominal increase for double the coverage. Hence, the recommendation from staff is to proceed with the Intact Insurance quote, because, for a little bit more money, we get double the insurance coverage. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We do need this to operate as a board. It has been a labor of many meetings of the minds, provincially, locally. So I thank staff who helped and explained as I needed, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Pat?
Just put forward a motion to support to endorse staff to enter into an insurance agreement with Intact Insurance.
Okay, is there a seconder for it? Christine, any questions, comments, discussion? Des?
So I understand that this is a requirement under the new Community Policing Act. My question would be, what are we insuring?
Yeah, so it would be general liability. So say you're traveling for PSB matters, that kind of came up. Say you get in an accident, someone is hurt, we are then have a claim against us, that insurance would cover that. I can get a more fulsome coverage and synopsis from Intact if the board wishes. It's dealing with all PSB matters since they're now not underneath the municipality. It's for claims, lawsuits, so on and so forth.
Okay, so this is like director and officer liability.
Yes,
insurance.
correct.
Okay. And, okay.
Okay, so if there's any other questions, comments, if not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Against? And it's carried.
Can I ask another question?
Shoot.
Why would we endorse the Intact one when we can go with the McFarlane one that the OAPSB has endorsed as being sufficient coverage for cheaper?
Yeah, it's a difference of $200 roughly. And so say it's just more coverage for a nominal increase. $200 is pretty immaterial. And say we did have a very large claim for whatever reason, for that slight increase, staff recommends that we go for double the coverage.
Okay.
I don't know whether this ever factors into it, but the city of Pembroke as a whole currently has its insurance through Intact. And when it goes out, there's one other policy that they've underwritten for a related board to the city. I'd put it that way.
Yep.
Okay, so that was carried. So we'll move on to next one, Community Watch Zone Edition, William Street.
Thank you, Chair. So known as Neighborhood Watch or Block Watch, this program helps reduce crime risk for residents and properties. A new community watch zone has been proposed to strengthen neighborhood safety in a designated area. The proposed zone includes William Street from Supple Street to Herbert Street. Community volunteers canvassed the area with positive responses from residents. Additional nearby streets, including Esther, Herbert, Supple, were also canvassed with positive reactions. So implementation of this new Community Watch program would include signage, and Crime Stoppers representatives have recommended the city's operations team handle the placement should the board approve the new zone. Signs can be installed within the approved boundaries to mark the Community Watch zone promoted as such. And approving the new community watch zone would enhance community safety efforts in the area and formally establish a partnership with the residents to help reduce crime in the area.
Thank you. And I know, just so that the entire board knows, that Michael and Des attend at the various community watch meetings, and I believe this is the 7th zone if approved.
I
Michael?
make the motion that we approve that new addition, Mr. Chair.
Des is seconding the motion. Any other discussion on the new addition? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next up, 2025 billing statement, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. I believe this is my last report, so you won't have to listen to me after this. So just a little bit of background on the OPP billing process. Each year, the OPP sends municipalities a billing statement, and this covers the estimated costs of policing services within the municipality. If the previous year's actual costs exceed the estimate, municipalities are billed for the shortfall. So there have been expressed municipality concerns, although it's recognized that there is a multifaceted and very significant value of OPP services for the safety of the community. The substantial cost increases are being spoken out in headlines across the province. So for example, in Pembroke this year, the cost increase for the 2025 OPP billing is going to increase by $837,000 roughly. And it's a 19% increase from 2024. So this increase is projected to raise the city's property tax levy by roughly 3.35%. And OPP will be holding webinars to discuss this billing statement and across the province for all municipalities and the 2023 cost reconciliation. So municipalities are encouraged to attend. We do have staff attending and can provide a high-level overview of what was reported there for more information for the board. And the rising OPP costs are creating significant financial strain on municipalities, prompting a call for provincial review of the billing model. And then again, this will all be addressed throughout the webinars, and we can report back to the board on what's shared from the OPP. And again, this is just a information report for committee, just to understand that, yes, there is a lot going on with the OPP billing. It is a very critical service within our communities, but throughout the province, there are discussions from respective municipalities and cities alike, just concerning the structure and how it's built.
Yes, so just information purposes, I can tell you that a number of municipalities have written to their MPP and so forth. The CEO and I attended with the MPP, and for some reason, some chose just to write to him. We were the only ones to actually go see him. But nonetheless, the AMO is tracking it. There is acknowledgement by, I believe, by the provincial level, and so we'll see where ultimately the dust settles on it. But again, it has nothing to do with adequate and effective policing. I know for myself, more than happy with the OPP. It's a billing thing, but all municipalities, in fact, we had a meeting this morning, all municipalities are trying to figure out, because our starting place at 3.35, Whitewater, I think was it was slightly higher. Like we're all in the same boat and we're all pushing. Okay, next one is traffic enforcement, Elgin Street, and Pat.
Okay, so I sort of addressed it. I was in contact with Mr. Lewis. There was no speed sign on Elgin Street, and there is a new playground on the Laurentian Valley sign. So I guess I was just wondering who took the sign down, and is it enforced, or like, is there a change coming to that speed limit? I wasn't sure why the sign was down, and that's when I added this to the agenda. But I know that children walk. There's no buses for the schools to come down Elgin anymore. All the children have to walk to Boundary, and some of the children are quite small. So I just wasn't sure. There's one speed sign, but I mean, the conversation we had today about automated speed, it may help, but it certainly won't help on Elgin unless there's something done. It's only twice in the day that I noticed the traffic is bad, and that is obviously work hours. So in the morning and then around 4 o'clock. So I'm just That was my concern, was the sign was down. Thank you. The speed sign is back up. But they come over that berm, and I think Brian knows more than anybody the makeup of that environment. So do you have any suggestions?
Through the chair. So the speed limit sign, that's the second or third time now that speed limit sign has gone missing. Not sure if they're out at the end of the street somewhere in the bush being used for roofing or something, maybe. I'm not quite sure, but they do tend to go missing on that. We have it going in. It is a dead end road. We don't like to use dead end anymore. It's a no exit road. So when you're driving into Elgin Street, you see the 50-kilometer-an-hour sign. You don't necessarily need to see it coming out because you already know you got in there. It was 50. It didn't change. The new playground has brought up some concerns regarding the amount of pedestrian traffic. There's a new subdivision that's going in with that playground. So the city and the township have been discussing that new subdivision in great detail, working together on other mitigating factors related to the subdivision and so forth. So hopefully that'll help. We do monitor traffic at that location. We will likely put the sign back up again. We're just trying to judge the best time of year to do it, not necessarily this time of year. And then the speed display sign. So we'll put it back up again, make sure everybody understands what the speed limit is. The berm, unfortunately, is the old rail bed. It does make a bit of a visibility issue. With that being said, those that adhere or those that realize it's a visibility issue tend to take their foot off the gas pedal and not put it on. If we were to flatten that with that long stretch, you may see speed increase. But with the new subdivision on the LV side, Laurentian Valley side, future subdivision on the City of Pembroke side, a number of mitigating factors will help control traffic in that location.
To the director, I imagine, like, certainly you put the Black Cat in a number of different places, and the visible radar devices. Is that street in the past of concern or to collect data, or? In the last couple times that we had the device there, we have used the display and not the Black Cat. We've got certain areas where we use the Black Cat, and we don't want people necessarily to know that we're collecting data. Otherwise, we use the display model. And for the board's information, just because the display isn't shown doesn't necessarily mean we're not collecting data. We do use stealth mode on the display as well to collect data. And we do it in a sequence so that we can find out if we've actually changed behaviors. And in a case like Elgin Street, where sometimes you just need to change the behavior and then remind people that we changed your behavior before, we want you to go back to that, you kind of forgot. We'll put it up, let people know you're speeding, slow down. We tend to see that change in behavior. We take the sign away, we put it at another location, and then we come back after a while and say, oh, you forgot about it, so we're going to remind you again. So we'll work through our normal processes in that area to kind of mitigate. Thank you. Next item, notice of motion. So as a bit of a preamble, if I can do it this way. So obviously when the agenda is being created, some of them Madam Clerk puts down, some of them is myself contacting various members who might go to an OAPSB meeting and I wasn't there. And so the item should go on there. And so I consult, or maybe it was the kids and cops. And if someone wasn't there, it's like, if it's of interest to the PSB, let's put it on. So in terms of the agenda, in terms of how it gets created, sometimes it's a mixture of how different items make its way there. The purpose of putting the notice of motion there, and I wasn't certainly hiding it because as I understand it, our agendas are public and made public, but was to put it there because there's a number of items raised in there. So just so that we're all clear, this is a notice of motion that was raised at the last council meeting to be discussed at a future council meeting in November. So council has not debated this, has not discussed this or any of that. although there's a number of, I'm sure that all of you have read through the 3 or 4 pages worth. So I'm sure that everyone has read through it. So that's why I put it on there. I'm aware that the counselor has been made aware by an individual is how he raised it with me. He's I'm trying to not pleased that I put it on this particular agenda. I've tried to explain that whether I put it on this agenda and the board decides to discuss it, or whether it goes to council and potentially gets tabled so that it comes then back to this board again to have input on the policing aspects. There's certain aspects in there about courts and whatnot that I don't know that the PSB, maybe you do have a comment or two about that, but there's items in there about the CAMSAVE program, and there's aspects in there that would pertain to council in terms of the CIP program, but there are certain aspects in here that are policing. So I'm in the board's hands. I'm not here to be a dictator, so I'm in the board's hands as to whether you want to discuss those particular items that are policing in nature, or whether it even gets tabled here, and then when it goes to council, I may be suggesting at that level that it get tabled to kick it back to here in any event because of the nature of some of the items that are raised in it. So I'm in the hands of the board as to what you want to do with this particular item. If nothing else, it was to bring it to your attention that there is an item being discussed at the council level that pertains to and touches upon policing, but it touches upon the health unit and the steering committee and the items that were involved in there. It touches upon the MESA program, touches upon a number of different, this is not, as I keep telling people, it's not a matter of the city can spend $1 million and pave a street and life moves on and I'll be probably gone by the time we ever touch it again. This is a complex issue. So I'm in the hands of the board as to what you wish to do in respect to 8G. Pat?
So there are several points in here that I agree we should task, but not at this level. So the ones in where it's the court system and that type of thing. I think what they're getting at is stiffer penalties for people that have been caught trafficking and repeat offenders, that type of thing. However, there are a couple of things in here that I think we could possibly, after we see what happens at the council level with this document, that we could do, and that would be like item 8, and that would be that our police service make a presentation to council, just updating them on like the good news that was reported today with those, the busts, basically, I want to call them. But just sort of update them in what's being done without releasing any, confidential information, but just to ensure the council and the public that we are doing a lot and that, we've been successful, and share some of the numbers that indicate that. But I think some of the things we could work on, but I think it really has to go to council first to see where they want to go with it. But there are some good things in here. There's some things that I think we're already doing, because I think this document was drafted quite some time ago and before some of the other agencies were getting involved with the crisis. I mean, it's been declared a crisis, as it says in here. They want us to declare a crisis, this document, but I think we've already done that, that we're in a drug crisis. No, we've never. Okay. It's an opiate overdose crisis, or there was some kind of crisis declared, or was it Pikwakanagan did it? The county in Pembroke never ever declared it. Okay, we talked about it. We knew we were in crisis, but we never declared. Okay.
And Belleville did. And in March, when I stood up the stakeholders, and I'm trying to remember what the language was, but it was not that it was a crisis. The individuals at that time felt that it was not a crisis, but a heightened
state of operation.
Yes, thank you. Okay. But, that being said, there's a lot of things that have taken place. And we could talk about the partnerships to educate council. Maybe not all members are up to date on everything that's happening in our community. But anyway, that being said, it has to go to council first, I guess.
Michael?
Mr. Chair, going back to the Belleville issue, we all heard the bad news that the downtown was shut down. 16 or 17 people, I think, passed away over a period of 3 days. But what we didn't hear is that there was a lot of homeless people had migrated from Toronto. Some stopped in Belleville. There was some in Napanee, Kingston, and other communities along the run. We didn't hear because it wasn't enough to trigger the media to put down the number. So we got to be careful when we look at that and pay attention, delve into it, because we got that right from the police department in Belleville. So, thank you.
So is overall the general, I don't know that we need a motion necessarily to formally table it, but the consensus is stand it down, basically, allow council to discuss, and then if need be, we can certainly bring it back up at this level if the council believes that there's utility in having discussion at this level. Right on. Next is under correspondence. It's just for everyone's edification. The new chair, which a very nice, welcoming individual. When she was here at the OAPSB meeting, we had an opportunity to meet with her. And then it's just the date of the next meeting. So we'll have a meeting in January, unless if the board is willing, depending upon what council does at the beginning of November regarding the notice of motion. If they want to involve us, perhaps we'll call a meeting in 2024 to discuss that particular item if the board is so willing. Okay, and then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. I have Des and I have Christine, and all in favor, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.